Dumbo Feather has been lucky enough to be invited into Parkville College to do work with you and your incredible teachers. And we've been so humbled by that work and quite shocked and deeply moved. And it's woken up a lot in all of us, I know, for the team. And I had the incredible good fortune of coming recently and doing a tour with Brendan around the campus. And this is children who were not getting an education. And now they are, by an extraordinary team of people who've become our heroes. So you're definitely one of our heroes, and I have lots of questions. We'll see what we get through. And then we will open it up to the floor so that you can ask Brendan your own questions. Where to start? I guess the first thing is, in the interview we talk a lot about Brendan and Brendan's life, but tonight I want to talk about the students. So who are they?
Thanks for having me here, for starters. And I do want to thank my entourage for joining me from the school. We have strong representation here tonight. The students, we operate as a school for all children and young people who are detained in custody within Victoria. And we also have a couple of campuses that for children who are not detained in custody, but they are housed, is the nicest way I can put it, within a secure setting. So that's children that live within child protection's care who are placed within a secure facility. So we have Maribyrnong and Ascot Vale. We also have another campus which is at Fairfield, which is called the Disability Forensic Assessment Treatment Service. So our students are, in many ways they're very different, but the common feature is that they've all experienced trauma and neglect and abuse, and have acted out in a way that's antisocial and have put themselves at great risk of harm or others, and so they are placed within custody. That's their binding characteristic. On top of that, they're an amazing bunch of kids who have an enormous amount to offer our society. And as the teachers here would attest to, they're incredible privilege to work with, to be a part of, as is, for all the teachers in the room. It's a joy to go to school each day. It's no doubt it's a challenge with the children that we are fortunate enough to educate. But there's a lot of laughter. It's terrific to be a part of that journey of someone who is, working towards developing themselves. And most kids in custody are really sincere about wanting to change their life, their trajectory, to transform. There's a lot of reasons why they may not when they exit. There's so many variables. I saw some kids today I went and said goodbye to as after they'd been into the Youth Parole Board. Kids that have been with us for a long time, and with they've had so much education, all the right supports around them. You just sort of got to cross your fingers and hope that everything will be okay. But you never know.
Because you were saying when we came, for a lot of the kids, it's one of the first times in their lives that they've had 3 square meals a day and shelter.
That's right. We had a kid today who has been with us for years, and he had to be talked into coming up to the Youth Parole Board meeting. He decided he didn't want to leave, and he had to be encouraged and supported to come up to leave for freedom. It just seems difficult to understand that, but when you realise that if you have good people around you and they're really supportive and encouraging, and you are getting your meals and everything's very predictable and safe, then you do flourish within that environment. So it becomes very overwhelming and frightening to move into uncertainty. You forget for kids that we had kids, we do have the frequent flyers that bounce in and out. And I had a kid up at Malmesbury recently saying to me, the last time I'm going to be fine this time, but the last time I remember when I left, I was really frightened in the car. I forgot how fast cars move. And I was, loud noises were difficult for me. All aspects of life become challenging. And so many kids do fall into the trap of, with the best of intentions, the talk in the foyer of the parole board afterwards was, we've got to catch up and party tonight because we're free, and you just hope that party just doesn't roll on for 5 days.
When you talk, I want to just note that the language you use is extraordinarily compassionate. The privilege to teach these kids, etc. You always use language like that from my brief encounters, and your staff do as well. You see it as a privilege to be there. And just to paint the picture, for me, I've never been inside a prison, and just getting in, the first step of going through security is quite overwhelming for someone who's never been in that environment. You have to take everything off, you have to put it aside, you have to put it in a locker. You can't take anything in, not a camera, not a phone, nothing, jewellery off. And that was quite astonishing. And then you walk in and it's this strange environment with very high walls all around it. And to go in and experience this environment you and your staff have created of these traumatised kids, one of the things, many things struck me, but one of them was how you shook everyone's hand and just looked them in the eyes and talked to them like a big brother. It was very moving. Talk a bit about what transition has happened since you've moved in there. How was it before? What was the problem? And how is it now? And why do you shake their hands? Sounds like a funny question, but
yeah,
it
no,
seemed
I know. Well, that's the way I would greet anyone. So it just makes sense to greet a child in that way. And
but you were told off for doing that initially?
Yeah, we were. We were advised not to shake hands. But that's a ridiculous way to operate amongst your fellow human beings. We did run, it still entertains me, makes me laugh, that we ran in our first year PD classes where we lined our teachers up and practiced shaking hands. And I knew that the entire state were sitting down to work out their literacy strategies, on their first curriculum day. And we were lined up out the front and making sure that we would have eye contact and handshakes and pounding, and there's all sorts of handshakes. But we haven't got time for that tonight. And if I can just say, one of our greatest issues has now become within the precincts that we operate in, is that kids, when they meet a teacher, they stop to shake hands. Everyone wants to stop. So you have 15 kids moving and everyone wants to shake hands, and there's someone on control watching everything on the cameras, waiting for, no one can move until that whole unit's moved. So the teachers are being asked, please, it's okay, you're going to shake hands, just walk with them, please, because they've just gone so far over the top. And the kids we had to teach children early on, they need to learn how to operate amongst their fellow human beings, that you do shake hands and you don't just brush past someone, or, you're welcomed. And the idea of the handshake is to welcome and to include children, or all of our students. It was, even for the kids early on, we would also say, look, it's terrific to have you here, thanks for coming today. And kids would say, well, I'm in jail, you know, like, I've got to come, I fucking hate school. And we would say, well, no, I mean, actually, you can just sit down on your floor in your room and no one can drag you to class, so I appreciate that you came in. I mean, you can say you're sick and you don't have to come to school. So we just make a point of thanking people, and well, I suppose that's our way of demonstrating regard. Yeah.
What gave you these ideas? So I know it sounds funny in the outside world, but when you go in there, like you took me into a room and you're like, oh, look at this nice campus, and go into a room and there were like 3 boys there. They had like an inordinate amount of people standing around them. So that was the only weird thing. But other than that, there were 3 quiet boys doing study, and they were working on essays or whatever, and one boy leans back and goes, oh, g'day, Brendan. And then you shook someone else's hand, he goes, he was my friend first, and there was like all this competition. And totally, there was full possession over you. So much love in the room, but it was quiet and they were doing their work. And then I looked, there was nothing to see. We walked out of the room and you said, those are the 3 worst offenders in Victoria.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Those kids.
Yeah.
And they were just kids. They were 15, 16 years old and doing their work, and they were gorgeous, actually, and full of love for you and respect. So it is rebellious what you did. You've changed something. How come? Where'd you get those ideas that you could take it into this environment?
Well, I worked in adult prisons and as a social worker before I made a decision to get into education. And I worked for the Salvos, going in to do adult prison visits and to prepare men that were recidivist offenders reintegrating back into society. And what I was always struck by was the prison guards on the way in. They'd be giving me a serve as I walked in. What a fucking waste of time, you know, you're going to do this and that and he's no good. And I thought, well, you know, like, he's our fellow human being here, you know. To me, I find it hard to understand that way of thinking. And I know that for people commit terrible crimes, I'm really conscious of that. I'm conscious that some people within our society will have views of these people should be punished every day. That having their liberty taken from them is not enough. But it's my view that rehabilitation is what's critical for people within custody, and that you can't just... I would imagine that you can't go to a classroom for someone who is a violent offender and give them some sort of lesson on how to operate in society and, you know, treat them poorly or look down upon them or feel as though these aren't your equals. I would think that would be incredibly challenging. And, you know, like I think about the fact that a court has made a decision that someone gets a sentence for a period of time for a crime, and what that means is that they're incarcerated, they have their liberty taken from them, and then it's our job is to get them in the best possible shape for reintegration into society. We don't do that well enough. You know, it's a blight on our society. How we have people right now that are in, let's say, Port Phillip prison, it's the men's maximum. People feel sort of more comfortable about the fact that people are locked up, right? They're in custody for crimes that they've committed. So we sleep easier, potentially, as a society. But they're actually coming back out into our society. And what are we doing about that? You know, like, I do want a better society. And it's important that we focus on development of people that haven't been able to. Clearly, they're in custody because they haven't been able to manage amongst their fellow human beings. Simple as that. So we need to do something about that. And I think we talk about it within our school that there's a Goethe quote.
You guys are philosophers.
Yeah.
I know this.
Yeah. If you treat someone as they are, that's how they remain. If you treat someone as they ought to be and as they could be, then they will become what they ought to be and could be. It's really simple. We, as teachers, this room full of teachers will understand the zone of proximal development in an educational sense, that you're always trying to locate where next for the learner with your content. But the same applies for their well-being, how they engage with others, how they operate peacefully amongst others. We need to be looking at where next for that person. So maybe this is a radical move by our school, but it works really well, and we're also very proud of, we're proud of how we operate amongst our fellow human beings. And it's also with the children, it's easy for so many people with children. It's harder when it's an adult, I think, when you're working with them, because as a child you get a 10-year-old in and you think, oh my God, you can get a 10-year-old into custody in Victoria. 11, 12, 13, 14, at what age do you think, this kid needs care, it's someone else's?
That was my strongest feeling when we were in the classroom. And we'll talk about telling stories, because we went in and Dumbo Feathered the classroom. So we were asking them, who inspires them, what's their story? And they were so hungry to tell their story. And my strongest response was, these were my boys. I've got a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old. And these boys were so full of life. Some of them were saying the most extraordinary things, unbelievable things that were so sort of dissonant in that environment. That one guy was like almost quoting Buddha. It was just wild.
But what I loved about that class was there was a kid in there who you asked, if you could change the world, what would you change? Remember that? Yeah. And the boy thought about it. There were a couple of responses. He said, look, it'd be a big ask to change the world, right?
Yeah.
He goes, look, I think I really need to focus on me at the moment.
Yeah.
And then he gave this talk about how he could control himself.
He said, I need to change myself first. And we all just were like, okay.
Yeah.
That's what it was like. And it was a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Because I kept expecting, there were students who came into the classroom and they couldn't concentrate. Yeah. They couldn't cope with that much concentrated effort. Yeah. And you could see behavioural problems and learning problems in that context and understand. But of course, you have to understand a person's narrative.
Yeah.
It doesn't even take more than 5 minutes of observation and kindness to see that someone's story got them that way. But he came back into the classroom and that was good.
Right.
Yeah, one of the boys just couldn't sit still, but
he
was curious.
There were also boys in that last class. I remember that there was someone who sat down the back and didn't really participate, and then he just blew the class away with a written response, where he talked about his father being in prison and how he'd never really known him, and he didn't want to be like that.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking. What do you learn from the kids at Parkville?
So many things. I like to think in footballing terms. So if it's okay, seeing I'm up, I've got the microphone, so I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, you're going to lose me quickly.
Yeah, I'll lose you, but
it's okay.
It'll come back around. Hang in there.
Yeah.
So in football, just in case some of you may not be fans, there's this idea that if you get a young footballer in to your team, the best thing you can do is you say play on the best player of the other team, because they'll take you to where the ball goes. It's your best learning. Our children take us, myself in particular, to all the areas of the education system. They teach me about what's important about education. NAPLAN's not important, right? For example, For example, but no, I'm not opposed to testing, because we do a lot of testing, right? A lot more than I'm going to say any other school in Victoria. I'm going to go with we do 5 times more testing than any other school in Victoria, I'm going to say. I have teachers nodding, and they're like, fucking you kill us with that, right? So I'm not opposed to testing, but really, you know, when we had children in 2010, right, there was a parliamentary report written by the Ombudsman with 27 recommendations into the poor conditions that children were living in at the Parkville campus only. Right? So you imagine that's the same at all campuses, Malmesbury, the secure welfares, Fairfield, the same standard of care. In 2010, there was something like 60% of staff that didn't have working with children's checks. There were, on average, there were 2 registered teachers at Parkville for 4 days a week that only worked with children 14 and under. There's not many 14 and under. No children in remand had access to a registered teacher, state curriculum, any form of school for up to 501 days. That changed in 2012. That's not that long ago, right? So what they show you, what that reveals is that you start to think to yourself about human rights and that everyone has the right to education, and they sort of shine a light on the Declaration of Human Rights. And what becomes apparent is for children that, if we can quote the Declaration, Article 26 states that everyone has the right to education, and education should be directed towards the full development of the human personality. Right? It's really important. And that education shall promote respect, tolerance and understanding amongst all people, and that, because, you know, it's the Universal Declaration, it should be directed towards the maintenance of peace. So for our children, really bring that to the forefront. So yes, they need to learn to read and write, and yes, they need to learn maths, and they need to learn so many skills, and we need to find their interest areas. But what they teach us is the importance of upholding human rights.
The kids?
Yeah. Yep. And we encourage them to exceed their expectations. They force us to exceed our expectations. That's the brilliant thing for us, because I can say for all of the staff from my school that are in here, no one walked to the front gates, you know, like where the iris scans are, and said, yeah, I've got this under control, I'm fine, thanks. Everyone walked in and took a deep breath and thought, can I do this? You know, because you're walking, you know that every child at our school's been expelled. So, you know, can I do this? Can I, as a teacher, I don't know if I can just teach the local primary school class. Can I come in here with violent offenders who are going to be non-compliant and resistant and offensive or threatening? Can I manage this? And
how do they manage?
They manage really well. They're a very happy bunch, as you've seen.
Whereas, can some of the teachers put their hands up?
Can all teachers put their hands up? Watch this.
Is this from Parkville?
Malmesbury, Parkville. Yeah, they're from all over here. Children's Court.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys are our heroes.
Yeah.
It's pretty
That's
amazing.
Right. Yeah. I don't know what they're doing here tonight.
Well, it's a really interesting point, because you said that before, that you were surprised that the staff from Parkville and the other campuses would be here, because you said, you know, you talk all the time.
A lot.
You talk a lot.
I pay them to endure like me.
Yeah. The true purpose of your role.
But you know what it also is it's, we're very supportive of each other. So we have a very strong culture of supporting each other. But it's also to recognise, honestly, that Dumbo Feather have rolled up their sleeves and come in and helped our kids. And we can't say that about too many other places, so it's for a couple of purposes. In recognition of that, I have no doubt.
That's going to make me cry.
Well, how much do you love, Benji, I think, first spoke to me about Dumbo Feather coming in and the idea of an interview. And so I said, oh yeah, sure, an interview. Well, tell them how about they come in and teach our guys and then we'll see. There were like 10 of them in. And now, we've had that relationship that's ongoing over a year now. So.
Yeah. I don't want the interview to turn though. It's got to be about you. And
sure.
So I think one of the most gripping things, you talked about Goethe and the Goethe quote about treating man as you wish him to be comes also from Viktor Frankl, who's one of our big heroes. And it's an unbelievable idea. It's hard to practice, which is to be the example you wish to see in the world, really, and to live that example. Talk to us all a little bit about unconditional positive regard, because I find that very moving.
It's a very core ingredient in forms of therapy, is that for the therapist, this is an idea anyway that Carl Rogers had in the 50s, was the idea of demonstrating unconditional positive regard or being non-judgmental, and that along with a few other ingredients, you create the right environment for someone to make change, a transformation. So it seemed to me that we needed to demonstrate that for our children in our classrooms if we are going to encourage the learner to go on this journey towards transformation and change. We've got to create the right environment, and the best way to do that is in our approach, what we demonstrate all day, every day. It also seems like the right way to operate amongst people. When we first started, we had a few teachers talking about the crimes that children committed, should they know them before they started with them. And we made a decision that we wouldn't. There was no point to that. It didn't seem like a point. I mean, I understand.
There's like a gory point, to know the gory details.
People are sort of interested in that, but that's for their own reasons. It doesn't, I don't see how it helps too much. We need to understand, I think, that we've had kids that have literally arrived and, once they detox, they don't know why they're in there. They can't remember.
Shit.
That they literally just woken up and just go, fuck, I don't even know what I'm in here for. I need to speak with my lawyer. I was on this bender and the next thing I know I'm back here, right? That happens. So to hold them and to think of them in relation to the behaviour and is potentially to not see them as a person and as a child. And
we are not, one is not only the worst thing you ever did.
That's right. It's something someone's done. That it's hard to. We had a boy at Malmesbury who was really successful with our school. We got him into Open University, right? And was undertaking a degree. He was in for culpable driving. So you imagine a kid from this side of the river, private school, but most of the room could imagine, one too many drinks and a car accident and someone dies, right? And you can see, you can think that young person can understand that crime that happens, terrible, but you can see through that very quickly to the person that they could potentially have so much to offer. I feel the same about all of our kids. That's an easy one to sort of explain to people that boy, when we started with him, he said, "Oh, what are you going to give me, fucking times tables or whatever?" We said, "I don't know, I'm going to have to give you times tables." "Yeah, I've already done year 12. I mean, everyone's done year 12 when they meet us, by the way. "I've already done year 12. You go, "Of course you have. No problem. We'll just come in anyway, you know." And this kid, he tested sort of off the chart, and so we decided, how about we have a go at, uni. He did a double degree that he undertook with us, and I think when he left, he was onto Spanish or something like that as part of a degree. But you can see clearly that there's more to a kid than their crime, and that's the important thing to remember, is that the behaviour doesn't define a person, and behaviour in the past or at one time or even multiple times doesn't define someone. And I also think that I think about it on a couple of levels, that if my children were ever, if they were ever in that situation, that's how I want someone to care for them. I mean, anyone's care. They're in the care of the state, and we get paid to perform a role, within our society to the best that we can, and want to do that really well. And the best way is to come from a position that's non-judgmental and supportive. That really works best. I promise.
I believe you. You're a treasure. I have to say, it wasn't like this before Brendan got there. It just wasn't like that. The violence on Parkville campus was through the roof, and children were unsafe. And just using the word children is correct. And I think you're a treasure, and all your teachers are so inspiring, because they're adults who've come with compassion, right foot forward, to be the best example to the rest of us, with the most marginalised and vulnerable. But do you get much resistance from people to the work you're doing?
We do get resistance, but ultimately, internally within the system of custody, there are people that hold to different ideas, whatever they've been able to cope with, for their own coping or for how they get through the day. That, it's tough love, or don't be too close, or you keep a boundary, or they don't deserve this or that. We had, which still happens, where, you get the odd person with a mindset that's in charge of supervision and security, that they want to do a room search and they want to search the students because someone's, stolen a book. Well, that's terrific. Like the books, you can take them. No, you've got to have a list of how many books. I'm like, oh, it's great if people take books, It's, or we, recently we had art classes where we had these old, with an outline of, old trains during art for kids to do graffiti on, right? And then we had, like a resistance from way up the top about you're glamorising crime and endorsing it. The kids are doing art on a piece of paper. That's not, and I know that they're going, but the absurdity is that, you can have kids that people are red hot on about having access to that, yet they could go back late at night and watch Capturing Malata or whatever it's called, It's absurd.
Yeah.
But I think the resistance is to a different approach, and it's also got to say what was understood as the way to work, I think, was sort of you have big blokes with tats who are pretty intimidating. We have an enormous amount of female staff who then will just waltz into the maximum security areas where, you know, and shake hands, hi, how you going? And it's no problems. It's very confronting for people, their ideas of how could a 24-year-old woman control this class. And, you know,
We talked about that though, articulate that. I think that's like the difference between two different versions of society. Yeah. Big, intimidating guys with tats and visible weaponry, etc. And now you've got 24-year-old young women.
Yeah.
What was that about? That was a conscious decision to bring in.
Yeah, well, we had a conscious decision we have no fear of going for picking staff that were not necessarily very experienced teachers. We always, you know, we still do aim to get people with high interpersonal skills, social, emotional intelligence. That's what we're after, and a willingness to follow a consistent approach, because that's really important within a school.
That's like the best thing I've ever heard.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, you did.
I'm off.
You went.
For having me?
Yeah. Like, you know, you did Harvard, don't give a shit. Can you relate to people?
Yeah.
That would
100%.
EQ. That's what you're
I have
going
no
for.
interest in that. Yeah, no, what we want is, you know, and then a commitment to the way that we would operate. So it's really simple. So we've had one person yell at a kid, and I don't think, you know, honestly, we walked, it was pretty severe, and that was his last day.
Huh.
Because
the teacher, not the student.
For the teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know enough about exactly what all other prisons are doing, and that's not because I don't want to research or I haven't put in the effort. It's just, if I called up Victoria in 2010 and asked them what was happening, they probably would have told me it was the best school in the Southern Hemisphere, I'm guessing. So you never really know. You find out once you're in. But we were really focused on having a state school, a bona fide state school, setting it up under the Education Act so that it would be entrenched for kids for the rest of the time, just like, you know, any other state school. And even better, I say for the rest of the time because schools can die if demographics change and you don't get the numbers. I'm confident we'll have the numbers, unfortunately. So we're right, and we're funded, and also what's happened with prisons in the past is that a TAFE or a school has a campus on the outside and it's an afterthought, and you can sort of push your poor performing teachers or just you don't represent them in the way that you would if that was your entire school community. So I'm not sure if any other states have a registered state school, as Melbourne High is, operating within their custody centre. I wouldn't think that they would have a high performing school like ours. Our school will top the state on all forms of data for the education department this year, except for university entrance. So I wouldn't think that's going to happen in too many places. I doubt that there's a school that runs 365 days. We're the only one in the state. I doubt that would happen anywhere else. So even on a Sunday, we're running PE, and that's the light day. On Saturdays is full timetable, and we operate a lot more than any other schools. As far as the approach, I really couldn't say because, again, I'm just be guessing, but I can say that we're about 2 weeks away from the Queensland, a delegation from Brisbane coming down to have a few days to look at Parkville College, and we're giving advice to the Western Australian Commissioner of Corrections at the moment. And we've done some work with New Zealand in informing them on how to operate within secure facilities. I'd start with the staff that are here. The staff often get feedback that comes back up that there's 3 principals here tonight who will attest to this. So they don't give enough critical feedback, like enough negative feedback in particular, because even the staff are conditioned to be hit with the negatives. Tell me what I'm doing wrong, please. When they're doing an outstanding job. And if we focus on the positives, then staff and the kids are the same. We'll try to realise more of the positives. It's a much more successful way of operating. In having unconditional positive regard, we talk about being genuine and honest and sincere as well. Once you've established a relationship, it's okay to say to someone, look, that's not on, or that's not good enough, or it's not about you, it's just that behaviour is not, if I don't tell you that, I'd be doing you a disservice.
It's actually an interesting point, talking about boundaries and socialisation without it being reprimand and punishment.
Yeah, so that's right. It's not you can get confused when you're talking about unconditional positive regard. It's sort of, you think, hold on, we're moving into the Dalai Lama area here of education, right? But it's also important to be able to say to someone, to have an honest conversation with them about their behaviour or how they're functioning amongst others, that I'm going to tell you this because I don't think anyone else has. And it's coming from a good place. It's not about you in the behaviour, but it's about, my regard for you, that I want to help you through this. Because if you did that somewhere else, they would kick you out of school. So you need to understand that I'm here to help. The kids they're a little bit confused, so they test it. So we understand attachment theory, that the kids will test and test. I've got a teacher up the back there who's Christy, and I won't name her. But anyway, Christy started with us this year, and I'm just going to tell you a story of the phone calls, right? But early on, no matter what, you're the next person in and you're someone new. And the kids, you're displaying all this, I'm not going to sort of let you down, I'm going to keep you included, I want you to be here, it's a better day when you're here. So they just sort of test that to see if it's true, to see if they can have reinforced what has been reinforced throughout their lives. And this is one of our most beautiful stories of the year, is that then we have an approach where with this class, Christy decided that she would call the mums, and rather than call them and say, which they get the phone call, and I can tell you is always, oh yeah, what's he done? Right? So teacher Christy rings and says, I just want to tell you a couple of things that have been terrific that your kid's done. Now, every mother cries. It's honest, right? But from custody. And then what happens is the child then has the phone call with mum. It's inevitable. And they want that again. And they want the mother to be proud of them, and they want to repair that. And you work through that. So it's sort of inevitable with that approach that there will be resistance to it because it's so foreign and so frightening to have a positive relationship. And then we sort of work through what Benji here has written a thesis on, about a rupture with that relationship, and then you move through it together. And then it's incredibly strengthened, incredibly strong. And like today, I was sitting with Sarah, who's one of our principals, with youth parole, saying goodbye to kids, and they're literally coming up and giving us hugs and high fives, and I'm thinking to myself, that's your opportunity to tell your principal, fuck you, I never fucking liked you, who do you think you are? And they were like really sad to see us go, and we have to say to them, look, I don't take this the wrong way, but I really hope I never see you again. Honestly, I want you to have a better life. You can do this. We're not really long enough to get really good understanding of what happens for all kids. And it's a very difficult one for our staff and team, because there's two ways often that it can go. Sometimes I have a teacher say, oh look, we haven't heard from whoever for a while. That's terrific. But then you're faced with, honestly, is that child dead? Or is that child doing well? And we have had that quite a few times this year. We have had, and this is for the staffing team, we had a boy who left us, and 2 weeks later he was shot dead, and the next day the boy that shot him then is in our class. Very difficult for us to deal with, right? And how to care for this kid who shot one of our kids. The reality is that we try to track them, and we've got plenty of great stories. We employ a couple of kids who've left us, who now work on reception, do a bit of admin work. We're training people to be integration aides, but you sort of need a bit of time since they've been out and to be going well and be really stable before they can come back into custody. So many kids leave on parole, and so it's hard to have them come back in if they're still in a way undertaking a sentence, even if it's in the community.
Talk for a second about the school on the outside.
We established a school on the outside for that reason. So we have a school which is, there's a couple of things that I love about the school. It's a great idea. Both the Secretary of Education, the former one, Richard Bolt, and Jill Callister, who's the Secretary of DHS, I had to make a pitch about the school, and they both said, well, what are you going to do for a kid? If this sounds incredible, what are you going to do for a kid who's about to finish year 11 and it's September and no one else will take him? And I said, I'd like plead at a school. They go, well, you'd want to set up something on the outside. And I said, that'd be a good idea. So it took us a couple of years, and we did. And we have kids that transition out of custody who continue with us at our school on the outside. So there's a group of kids that we do track, and we do, we had a kid just complete year 12, which is great. That would have never happened for that child. We had a big celebration and a barbecue for that person. And that student now is, as much as we can, we keep them involved with the school. But the hardest thing is the transition, because we can control so much within our settings, but the whole education system relies on putting your trust in others when they go somewhere else. And I know that Berry was with me. We had a kid that he just said to us, I want to go to this school. He's been doing so well. Yeah. And he said, I want to go to this school. You told him how well I'm doing. We sure did. I can't believe they don't want me. This is the best I've ever been in my life, right? I want to finish year 11 and 12. But he couldn't comprehend that by virtue of him being from Parkville College, that a school is full, right? And so the kids are faced with enormous barriers, which is really hard to control. And we really have to hope that...
You were almost begging him to go to the school on the outside. You're like, don't just not do school, come to us.
Yeah, because he was saying, fuck it, I'm not going to go to school. So he was saying, just come to us and we can help get you in somewhere else. But that's the hardest part. Where to next? We've got lots of great stories. We've got some really, really sad ones. It's sort of the key to a really high-performing school is cultivating the climate, getting the culture right. That's the foundation. The trick is you do the same things that you do with the kids. That's it. You treat them well. You You treat everyone with respect. You have high regard for them. Once they're in, they're in. And then you chips all in with them and you back them in. And you give them great, real professional development opportunities. You give them real leadership opportunities. You pay them better than any other school. You give them less face-to-face teaching time so they can focus on what's important, the relationships. And then that just starts to, and the staff do it. I'm sitting up here and it's the staff that do all the work. They do that, they inspire each other. But that's what I'm always focused on, is the culture and well-being. So we're very particular. We have, supervision. I saw Eva before. Eva's here. Hi, Eva. Eva's at our Malmesbury campus. So we employed Eva as a starting point as a teacher, but she's also a psychotherapist to make sure that from day one, because we had a sort of a outpost at Malmesbury, that she would look after staff well-being while they were isolated up in the country. So we've had a strong focus of psychological well-being and support at all times.
But it's not, the thing about that I think is so vital, I can feel it with your incredible teachers who we love and with you, that culture is real. Most organisations, and it even happens here in Small Giants and Dumbo, we could all be tempted to miss the culture meeting. Like, I got shit to do, I got reports to, like, that's just annoying and I don't want to kumbaya with anyone today. And even today something happened where I've got heaps on, I'm going away in a day and I was rushing and the day was busy and I was going to miss something really important that was related to culture and was related to the heart space and the soul space of what we do here. And my husband rightly said, he reminds me of you, but he's like, that's the stuff you can't miss.
Yeah.
Everything else can wait. And the culture is the most important thing, and relationships are the most important thing, and being with people and hearing their stories is where it's all at, and NAPLAN can wait.
Yeah, and in fact I think that, with the performance of staff and the performance of children, that if you get that right, everything's easy. It's not that it can wait, like, I talked about on day one, we don't normally in our first few days, it's about, of the year, you have a few days, it's usually planning, and we sort of reset and galvanise our group, and we strengthen our commitment to each other, and we have a focus on our ideology and our pursuit together. We're all in this together. The idea of collective leadership. We are changing our society for the better, and it's something we should be proud of and that we strive towards. But in doing that, my thinking is that, the testing, we get that right, then we will top the state. That's so, I find it a curious thing that, we talk about NAPLAN and standardised testing, that for schools to want to lift their testing scores, in literacy they focus on literacy strategies, whereas I would firmly focus on lifting morale, diminishing distress, having more connectedness. If you're feeling good, you'll perform well. Easy.
Yeah.
My thinking is that if this works for kids in custody, this works incredibly well for children not in custody. They'll flourish. And some of the private schools are really onto this. So Geelong Grammar, they pump their money now into positive psychology and character strengths of children. My last talk this week was at Melbourne Grammar for their leadership team in what really matters in education, because they nailed we'll get you into university probably about 50 years ago. They got that under control. Right? So now they're looking at, in a competitive market, the whole child, building resilience, confidence, how do we do these things? And so I think the application into mainstream school settings would work incredibly well. I just can't see how it wouldn't. Yeah, it's a difficult one. We've got a kid at Secure Welfare who she just doesn't understand boundaries. And the last time that I saw her, she ran at me to hug and then hit me in the arm and like didn't really know what to do, you know. Happy to see me, hug, hit, what do I do here? Really like corked me. It's a difficult one for our staff because, yeah, sometimes I had my children, I was in Indonesia for a little while, and the teacher said to me, you're coming from a different culture, but we hug kids every day when we see them and leave. Are you okay with that? I love that. That's great. You know, you're going to give them a hug. That's great. The difficulty is there's so many confused boundaries for our children in the way that adults have operated with them. And you've got to be really mindful of that. So it's important then is to be explicit about that. That's the hard thing, is that I've got one student who I always hug, and it's accepted that I hug the kid because the kid, before I was at Parkville, long before, I had him as a 12-year-old or 10, 12 on his first day in the country, right? So it was at the Western English Language School, and he was in my class, and I was with him. He's 21 now, and he's in custody for a while, and we recognised, I thought I must have known him from earlier at Parkville or wherever, and he was knocking up a CV, and I thought, oh my God, I reckon I thought you was a 10-year-old. And I went back, I had the folder, and I thought, here's a photo. And so we've got this long, long connection for this boy who's come from Horn of Africa, who doesn't have too much in the way of family. So when I see him, we just, come here. So there's a hug, right? But otherwise, I'm very mindful that, it's important to shake hands, and it's important to be able to explain boundaries, and that's, our staff here would, that's what their clinical supervision has an enormous focus on.
So what do you actually do if the kid goes in for a hug or a hit?
Brace. It's important, like for that girl, it's important to say to her, come on, and just keep reminding her, no, we just shake hands. We had a hugger a few years ago. We had a boy that he just wanted to hug the whole time. We would say, look, we'll walk in to see the boy and go, remember handshake? Handshake's important, because the kid he just do that to anyone, and he got himself into trouble in those areas, so honestly, the kid, we had to talk to him about all sorts of stuff that was inappropriate, is the nicest way to put it. The kid had intellectual impairment, and the kids need to be taught what is okay amongst others. And so I suppose the important thing is that your modelling is a critical element of education, and that it's okay to teach, it's okay to give instruction on behaviour. And that's an important thing to do, is to say, look, it's, look, you've only known me for a week or two, and you're over-disclosing a little bit here. It's okay to do that. It's helpful. But that's a lifelong sort of pursuit for so many staff about maintaining that. It's a challenge, And there's no simple answer to it except to keep working, and you work with your peers on that, about maintaining a boundary that's best for the child. It is. I think there was an organisation that was doing mentoring with kids. I think it's got. There's a lot of merit in that. We've got Shane Evans, who's here, who's our works at the courts with us, and he runs the Koori Cultural Education Program with Uncle Jim Berg, and they're very focused on having cultural liaison or mentors when kids go back to continue in whatever area within the state, that there's someone significant that can continue their cultural education or mentoring. The hard thing is for us that, it's hard to set up that. That's an enormous amount of work. So at Parkville right now, a kid will do reading, writing and numeracy for 1 hour each, interspersed with and deliberately in between PE, a personal development class and a vocational, a trade. At Malmesbury we have extra trade, so they do an hour and a half of reading, writing, maths, and then they'll have double the time in trades. It's an older group of boys until 21. We follow the same sort of timetable at the Secure Welfares and Fairfield. On Fridays at Parkville, for a lot of the younger ones, we make a transition that we bring the teachers, so registered teachers who've done their 4 years of study, will do everything on a Friday morning, and we bring our vet teachers, for example, in to do training, personal development. And then we swap them over, and the kids go on a high interest vocational education through the weekend, which then happens in the school holidays. And at Malmesbury, once we hit school holiday time, it's just all trades, vocational, high interest. Give them a bit of a break from school, because we do smash the kids with reading and writing and maths. There's no doubt about that.
And just to point out, before Brendan got there and this all started, the kids were sitting in the rec room.
Yeah, they didn't have a lot to do.
That's all they did.
I can remember for Malmesbury, right, there's 18 to 21-year-old boys there. But the boys have, their schooling they've been very disengaged from education. And many of them, if, on testing, is very, very low. So when Parkville was set up, Parkville campus, I was sitting within the Department of Education with pretty senior people who said, right, we're good to go in Parkville, we'll sign off on that. And I said, well, hold on, what about Malmesbury here? And even the staff there didn't realise that in the Act we go to 20 for high schools, for fully funded positions, 20 on the 1st of Jan, because someone thought, well, a kid could have glandular fever, they go away for a year or they stay down, so 18's about the time you finish, we'll give a bit of a buffer to 20. So no one had funded Malmesbury, so there was no school education going on for kids at Malmesbury for its existence. And that was, no one had really looked up the Education Act and thought we should pile that in. So we've had a massive trade focus up there, but that campus has just extended, and we're about to have a bit of a change to, I think it works quite well to have kids going from, I really like, if I could have it for all classes, your first session of reading, nice and quiet, drop everyone's heart levels, co-regulate, nice and calm, then into something like PE, and ideally they have a shower, and then bounce back into, it's not always the case, bounce back in for some numeracy, have a good feed, do some personal development, do their writing class, and then, get their hands onto something. I reckon that is a pretty good model.
Brendan,
Berry.
you're the best. You're a complete inspiration. We are all incredibly grateful to all of you for not only the work you do, but welcoming us in to have more compassion. And we've learnt so much from those kids, and being exposed to it has changed our lives. And thank you to all the teachers in the room, and please can we thank Brendan.